Jonathan Miller stepped out of the towering glass building that bore his name, Miller Industries. It was past midnight, the city quiet, the only sound the faint hum of distant traffic. His black BMW sat in the far corner of the parking lot, gleaming under the cold fluorescent lights. For Jonathan, nights like this were routine. Long hours, endless meetings, and tomorrow's weight already pressing on his shoulders. Tomorrow, after all, was the merger. $400 million on the line. His legacy on the line. He pressed the unlock button, the familiar click echoing across the empty lot. Sliding into the driver's seat, Jonathan slipped the key into the ignition, when suddenly a sharp, high-pitched voice cut through the silence. "Shut up! Don't say a word!" Jonathan froze. The voice hadn't come from outside. It came from inside his car. Slowly, he turned his head toward the back seat. There, crouched low and trembling, was a little girl, no older than 7, with messy curls framing her face and wide, fearful eyes that glistened under the dim light. Her clothes were dirty, her small fists clenched. Jonathan's pulse raced. "Who are you? How did you?" "Don't talk," she hissed. "They're listening. Up there." Her small finger pointed toward the illuminated 10th floor of the building behind him. Jonathan followed her gaze. His office. "Who's listening?" he asked, lowering his voice. "Your partner and the blonde woman. They said you'd be here now." Jonathan's hand froze on the steering wheel. Marcus Williams, his partner of 15 years. And Diana Foster, his executive assistant, loyal for over a decade. 2 people he trusted more than anyone. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. The girl swallowed, her voice trembling. "They said tomorrow you'll lose everything, that you'll sign papers without reading, that the day after tomorrow you'll have nothing. They laughed at you." Jonathan's chest tightened. Tomorrow was the merger, a deal Marcus and Diana had orchestrated from the start. Could this child be telling the truth? "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Jasmine," she whispered. "And you're Jonathan Miller." They said it over and over. She hesitated, her eyes glistening. "Are you going to call the police on me now?" Jonathan stared at her for a long moment. This fragile child had risked everything to warn him, a complete stranger. Why? He didn't know. But what he did know was simple. For the first time in years, Jonathan Miller felt something he hadn't in a long time. Fear. And strangely, hope. Because tonight, in the most unlikely way, his war had already begun. The BMW rolled slowly through the sleeping city, its headlights cutting across empty streets. Jonathan's hands gripped the wheel tighter than usual, but his mind was miles away. In the back seat, Jasmine stayed low, her small eyes darting nervously to the mirrors. She wasn't acting like a child playing games. Every movement screamed fear and urgency. "Tell me everything you heard," Jonathan said finally, his voice low, almost a growl. Jasmine hesitated, then whispered, "They said you'll walk into the meeting tomorrow smiling, that you'll sign without even reading. The papers are ready. The blonde woman, Diana, she laughed. She said you're just a little dog who trusts too much. And the day after tomorrow, you'll be looking for a job." Jonathan's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening against the leather steering wheel. He had known Marcus for 15 years, Diana for 10. He had trusted them with everything, his company, his finances, his life. Could it be true? Could the people closest to him really be plotting his destruction? Jasmine's voice broke the silence again. "They called you stupid, a fool. They said you'd never see it coming." Jonathan's chest burned, but not just with anger. Betrayal had always been something that happened to other men, not him, not Jonathan Miller, who had built an empire from nothing. And yet hearing it from the lips of a 7-year-old girl made it undeniable. He glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Why did you come to me, Jasmine? Why risk sneaking into my car? You don't even know me." Her eyes met his with a steadiness far beyond her years. "Because I know what it's like when people treat you like you don't exist. I saw how they talked about you, like you're nothing. My grandma always said, if you see someone getting stepped on and you can help, you help. Because one day it could be you." Jonathan swallowed hard. The wisdom of this child struck deeper than any boardroom lecture. "Where do you live?" he asked softly. She shrugged. "Nowhere, really. Sometimes the shelter, sometimes the street. Depends if there's space, or if the older boys aren't being mean." She said it so casually that Jonathan's heart twisted. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jasmine asked suddenly, "Do they know your secrets?" Jonathan sighed, staring at the road ahead. "They know everything. My schedule, my accounts, my passwords. I gave them full access. I trusted them with everything." Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Then maybe you know things about them too." The words hit Jonathan like a spark in the dark. He did. He remembered glimpses, odd meetings Marcus brushed off, bonuses Diana arranged for herself, documents that had never quite added up. He had ignored them all, blind with trust. Maybe he wasn't as blind as they thought. He pulled into a late-night diner and parked. "Hungry?" he asked. Jasmine nodded shyly. Moments later, she sat in a booth devouring a burger while Jonathan stirred a coffee he didn't taste. His phone buzzed on the table. A message from Marcus lit the screen. "Ready for tomorrow, buddy? The Japanese investors will love our proposal. You're about to retire rich." Jonathan showed it to Jasmine. She smirked bitterly. "He's lying to your face and smiling about it." Jonathan typed a polite reply, masking the storm boiling inside him. For the first time in years, he felt clarity sharpening inside him like a blade. "They think you're weak," Jasmine said, licking ketchup from her fingers. "But you're not, are you?" Jonathan looked at her, his eyes harder now. "No, Jasmine, I'm not." And tomorrow, Marcus and Diana would learn that the man they thought was blind had just opened his eyes. The diner smelled faintly of burnt coffee and fried food, but Jonathan hardly noticed. He sat in the booth opposite Jasmine, watching her finish the last bite of her burger as if it were her first real meal in days. Around them, the neon sign flickered, casting a nervous glow across the chrome and glass. Jonathan's phone still sat on the table, Marcus's cheerful message glowing like poison. "You're about to retire rich." Every word dripped with arrogance. Every word confirmed Jasmine's story. For 15 years, Marcus Williams had been his partner, his so-called brother. For 10 years, Diana Foster had been the right hand who managed his every detail. He had trusted them more than anyone. And yet, the more Jonathan thought about it, the more cracks began to show. Marcus's secret meetings he'd brushed off. Diana's flawless reports that were always a little too perfect. The subtle shifts in tone over the past year. The moments Jonathan had dismissed as paranoia. All the pieces he hadn't wanted to see were now falling into place. He ran a hand across his face. "They've been planning this for years," he murmured. Jasmine leaned forward, her small arms folded on the table. "Then that means you have years of things on them too. People think kids don't notice, but I see everything. And I bet you've seen things too. You just didn't want to believe them." Her words struck him hard. She was right. He had ignored his instincts. He had let trust blind him. But now the blindfold was gone. Jonathan looked into her sharp little eyes. "You're very smart, Jasmine." She shrugged, sipping from a milkshake almost too big for her hands. "When you don't have anything, you pay attention. It's the only way to survive." She tilted her head. "So what are you going to do now? Just let them take everything?" Jonathan's grip tightened around his coffee mug. "No," he said, his voice steady. His phone rang again. The name on the screen? Marcus. Jonathan inhaled slowly, forcing calm. He answered. "Jonathan!" Marcus's booming voice filled the line, warm and familiar. Too familiar. I wanted to check in. Tomorrow's the big day, my friend. Diana and I have everything ready. Just come in, smile, and sign where she tells you. Easy as pie. Jonathan forced a chuckle. Sounds perfect. You trust us, right? Marcus asked, his tone smug. Always, Jonathan lied, his eyes cold. They exchanged a few more words before Jonathan hung up. Jasmine was watching him intently. Your eyes look different, she whispered. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Different how? Like when my grandma caught someone lying. She used to say, when people think they're smarter than you, that's when you have to be the most careful. Jonathan leaned back, the storm inside him focusing into something sharper. Tomorrow, Marcus and Diana thought they would bury him. But tomorrow might be the day they were buried instead. He placed cash on the table, slid his phone into his pocket, and stood. Come on, he said, we've got work to do. Jasmine jumped from the booth, her small face lit with fierce determination. She didn't know what the plan was. She only knew one thing. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about revenge. By the time Jonathan parked his BMW under the glowing lights of his penthouse, the city was sinking deeper into sleep. He carried Jasmine upstairs, her small frame weightless in his arms, and laid her gently on the couch. She curled up instantly, clutching the blanket he tucked around her. For a long moment, Jonathan simply watched her. A child with nothing had risked everything to save him. It was more loyalty than he had ever gotten from people he'd paid millions to.
Trust. He poured himself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen counter. His mind replayed Jasmine's words, Marcus's smug laugh, Diana's false sweetness. Tomorrow wasn't just a meeting, it was an execution. And if he walked in unprepared, he would be signing away his empire and his future. Jonathan knew he needed help, real help. Someone who could see through the lies. A name came back to him, Gabriel Torres. Once, Gabriel had been the sharpest investigator on Miller Industries' payroll. A former police officer, relentless and sharp-eyed. He had a way of digging where others couldn't, uncovering things people thought were buried forever. But Marcus had insisted Gabriel was too expensive, too paranoid. Jonathan, trusting as always, had agreed to cut him loose. Now he understood why. Jonathan scrolled through his contacts until he found the number. His thumb hovered over the call button. It was late, but tomorrow was too close to wait. He pressed call. The line clicked. "Jonathan Miller?" Gabriel's voice answered, low and rough. "Well, that's a surprise. I thought you forgot about me after your people shoved me out." "It wasn't my decision," Jonathan said firmly. "Marcus wanted you gone because you asked too many questions." Silence. Then a dry laugh. "Figures. So why are you calling me now?" Jonathan lowered his voice, glancing at the couch where Jasmine slept. "Because Marcus and Diana are planning to steal everything tomorrow. I need proof, Gabriel, real proof." For a moment, only the faint hum of the line filled the silence. Then Gabriel's tone hardened. "Where are you?" "Downtown, my penthouse." "Stay there. Don't move. I'll be there in 2 hours." Jonathan ended the call, exhaling. For the first time that night, he felt a flicker of control. Jasmine stirred, her sleepy voice breaking the silence. "Who was that?" "An old friend," Jonathan replied. "Someone who can help us." "Help us catch them?" she asked. Jonathan nodded. "Yes, catch them and stop them." The little girl smiled faintly before sinking back into the blanket. "Then maybe they're not as smart as they think." Jonathan looked out at the skyline, glittering against the night. Marcus and Diana thought tomorrow would be their triumph, but they had no idea that an old ally was on his way back, and that Jonathan Miller was no longer alone. At 3 in the morning, a steady knock echoed through the penthouse. Jonathan opened the door to find Gabriel Torres standing there exactly as he remembered him, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that missed nothing. A worn trench coat clung to his frame, and a leather briefcase dangled from his hand. "You look like hell," Gabriel said bluntly as he stepped inside. "But betrayal does that to a man." Jonathan gave a tight smile. "You don't know the half of it." From the couch, Jasmine stirred under her blanket, blinking at the stranger. "Who's he?" she asked, her voice small but curious. "This," Jonathan said, "is someone who's going to help us." Gabriel gave the girl a once-over, raising an eyebrow. Jonathan explained quickly how she had overheard Marcus and Diana. Instead of doubt, Gabriel let out a low whistle. "So, a 7-year-old uncovered what I suspected for years. Impressive." Jasmine sat up straighter. "My grandma always said, when you have nothing, you learn to pay attention." Gabriel chuckled. "Smart kid." He placed the briefcase on the table and opened it with a snap. Inside was a tablet and several thick folders. "While you were losing sleep, I did some digging. Marcus and Diana aren't just planning to push you out tomorrow. They've been stealing from you for years." Jonathan leaned forward, his chest tightening. "Show me." Gabriel swiped through the tablet, revealing spreadsheets, wire transfers, and contracts with names Jonathan didn't recognize. They created fake companies, phantom clients, funneled more than $5 million out of Miller Industries, offshore accounts. And tomorrow's merger? It's their way to wash it all clean. Once you sign, you'll validate every fraudulent transfer. They'll disappear rich. You'll be left holding the bag. Jonathan stared at the glowing screen. His empire, the company he built from nothing, had been used as a front for thieves. His partner, his assistant, people he had trusted like family. "They used my company," he muttered bitterly. "They used my name." "Yes," Gabriel said flatly, "and if you sign tomorrow, the law will say you were in on it." Jasmine's voice cut in sharply. "But now you know. That means you can stop them." Jonathan looked at her, then at Gabriel. "How?" Gabriel leaned back. "Two options. Turn everything over to the police now and hope it sticks. Or," his lips curled into a thin smile, "or you let them think they've won. You go in tomorrow, play the fool, and when they show their hand, we bring the hammer down. With evidence, witnesses, and recordings, they'll have nowhere to run." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Like in a movie," she whispered.
Jonathan felt something he hadn't in weeks: control. He turned back to Gabriel. "Then tomorrow, I play along. I'll smile, I'll nod, I'll even pick up the pen. But when the curtain falls..." His eyes hardened, his voice a blade. "It'll be their empire that crumbles, not mine." The first light of dawn spilled across the skyline as Jonathan stood by his penthouse window, coffee in hand. He looked every bit the composed CEO. Suit pressed, tie perfectly knotted, but beneath the calm surface, his mind was sharper than it had ever been. Today wasn't business. Today was war. Behind him, Jasmine sat at the table nibbling toast while scrolling through Gabriel's tablet. Numbers and contracts flashed across the screen, far too complicated for most kids her age, but she studied them like a puzzle. "They've been stealing for so long," she muttered, shaking her head. Gabriel, seated across from her, smirked. "They always get greedy. Greed makes people sloppy." Jonathan's phone buzzed. A message from Diana, precise as always. "Good morning, boss. Everything is ready. The Japanese arrive at 2 p.m. Just show up and trust me, as always." Jonathan's lips curved into a bitter smile. Trust me. How many times had he heard those words? And how many times had they been nothing but poison? Almost immediately, another message arrived. "Marcus, partner, today's the day. After this, we'll retire like kings. Don't worry, we've handled every detail." Jonathan slid the phone toward Gabriel. "They think I'm blind." Gabriel chuckled. "And that's exactly why this will work. Overconfidence kills." Jasmine looked up from the tablet, her small face serious. "They'll smile at you today. Pretend to care. But remember, dogs that smile still bite." Jonathan met her eyes in the reflection of the glass and gave a small nod. "And today," he said quietly, "I bite back." The morning passed in tense silence. Jonathan dressed in his finest suit, every movement deliberate, as if donning armor for battle. Gabriel spread the files across the counter, rehearsing the plan like a general before combat. We let them feel safe. Let them think you'll sign. Meanwhile, I'll be in the wings with everything we need to bury them. Jasmine stays close. Nobody notices a child, and that's her advantage. Jonathan hesitated at the thought of her being involved, but then he remembered. Without Jasmine, none of this would even be possible. She had already risked more than most adults ever would. At noon, Jonathan picked up his leather briefcase. It felt heavier than usual, not with contracts, but with evidence and resolve. As he locked the door, Jasmine tugged his sleeve. "Do you think they'll notice?" He bent down slightly, meeting her gaze. "They'll notice, Jasmine, but only when it's too late." The BMW glided through the streets, carrying them toward the glass tower where everything would be decided. Marcus and Diana believed they had built the perfect trap, but they had no idea the lamb they thought they were leading to slaughter had grown fangs overnight. At 1:58 p.m., Jonathan Miller stepped out of the elevator onto the top floor of Miller Industries. The polished glass walls gleamed under the afternoon sun, every detail perfect for the arrival of the Japanese investors. To anyone watching, he looked like a man walking into another ordinary meeting. Inside, however, every step carried the weight of a battlefield march. Marcus was already in the conference room, flashing his trademark smile. "Jonathan! There he is, the man of the hour!" He strode forward, clapping Jonathan on the shoulder like a brother. His grip was firm, too firm, as if reminding Jonathan who held the power. "Good to see you, Marcus," Jonathan said evenly, hiding the contempt simmering beneath his calm exterior. Diana approached next, elegant in her fitted suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Boss," she said warmly, her voice dripping with manufactured affection, "I've highlighted everything for you. Just sign where I marked with yellow tabs. Trust me, as always." Jonathan smiled faintly, careful not to let it reach his eyes. "Of course, Diana, you've never let me down." Her lips curved into a satisfied smile, completely unaware that her words now cut like knives. Marcus gestured toward the pristine folders spread across the table. "Everything's ready. Once the Japanese arrive, we'll seal the deal. This is our moment, Jonathan. 15 years in the making." 15 years of lies, Jonathan thought, but he nodded, slipping into the role they expected. The loyal partner, the trusting fool. As Marcus rambled on about projections and growth, Jonathan's gaze flicked to the polished glass door. Beyond it, Gabriel was waiting with a box of files and 2 federal investigators, ready to walk in at the perfect moment. Jasmine, hidden nearby with a phone in her pocket, was ready to record every word that mattered. Inside the room, Marcus leaned closer, his voice conspiratorial. "You don't need to stress over the details. Jonathan, you've always had us for that. Just sign, smile, and enjoy retirement. You've earned it." Jonathan forced a chuckle. "You always did have a way with details." Diana slid the top document toward him, her manicured finger tapping the yellow tab. "Here, one signature, and your future is secure." Jonathan picked up the pen, twirling it slowly between his fingers. He let the silence stretch, watching both of them. Marcus was smirking. Diana was serene. They believed they had won. Jonathan's heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with anticipation. They thought they were watching a puppet about to dance on its strings. But what they didn't know was that the strings had been cut. And in a matter of minutes, it would be their show that collapsed. At exactly 2:05 p.m., the doors of the Miller Industries conference room swung open. 3 Japanese investors entered, impeccably dressed, their expressions calm but unreadable. Marcus leapt forward like a performer on stage, all charm and energy.
"Gentlemen," he greeted, bowing slightly with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Welcome, welcome. We've been eagerly awaiting this day." Jonathan rose slowly, his posture measured, his smile professional. "Thank you for coming. We're honored to host you." The investors took their seats at the polished table. Diana glided forward with a tray of documents, laying them out with precision. "Here are the final contracts," she explained smoothly. "Everything has been reviewed and prepared for signature. Mr. Miller simply needs to add his approval." One of the investors nodded politely, flipping through the first folder. Marcus clasped his hands together, beaming. "You'll see that our projections are flawless. This merger will be mutually beneficial, and with Jonathan's signature, everything becomes official." Jonathan sat back, pen still in hand, pretending to absorb the details. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught Diana watching him closely. Her confidence radiated through every gesture, as if she were savoring his downfall. "They're waiting for you, Jonathan," Marcus whispered, leaning in. His tone was low, almost mocking. "Don't overthink it. Just sign, like you always do." Jonathan smiled faintly, disguising the storm beneath. "You're right, Marcus. You've always handled the details." The investors exchanged subtle glances, clearly noting the dynamic in the room. Marcus didn't notice. He was too busy basking in his own arrogance. Diana, meanwhile, adjusted her blouse and leaned closer, tapping once again at the yellow tab she had marked. "Here, Jonathan, this line. That's all it takes." Jonathan held the pen over the paper, his hand steady. For a moment, silence filled the room. Marcus and Diana leaned forward, like hunters watching their prey step into the trap. The investors remained quiet, their eyes flicking between the three of them. Then Jonathan lowered the pen, only to set it gently on the table. "Before I sign," he said casually, "there's something I'd like to share." Marcus's smile faltered for the first time. "Share? Now?" "Yes." Jonathan pressed a button on the small remote Gabriel had slipped him earlier. The screen at the far end of the room lit up, displaying spreadsheets and transfer logs. Jonathan's voice was calm, but razor-sharp. "These are financial records, transfers from Miller Industries into 17 shell companies, totaling more than $5 million. Diana's hand froze on the folder. Marcus's face tightened, but he forced a laugh. "Jonathan, this isn't the time for—" Jonathan cut him off. "I think it's exactly the time." The investors straightened in their seats. Marcus's easy confidence began to crack. Diana's lips parted, but no words came. Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes cold. "You wanted me to sign away my company. But today, Marcus, Diana, it's your signatures that will matter most, on a very different set of documents." The room fell silent, the trap ready to close. The conference room door opened again with a sharp click. Gabriel stepped inside, flanked by two federal investigators in dark suits. He carried a heavy box of files under one arm, his expression cool and deliberate. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but this concerns Miller Industries." Marcus shot to his feet, his smile gone. "What the hell is this? Jonathan, what's going on?" Jonathan didn't flinch. "This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Gabriel set the box on the table and opened documents across the glossy surface. Bank statements, fake contracts, testimonies from phantom clients Marcus and Diana invented. 2 years of theft and laundering, all meticulously documented. Diana's face paled. This is absurd. Jonathan, you can't believe." Her voice was cut off by a recording suddenly playing through Gabriel's phone. Diana's own words filled the room, crystal clear. "Jonathan is a sentimental idiot. The day after tomorrow, he'll have nothing. That clown will never know what."
"Hit him." Marcus's voice followed. 15 years pretending to be his friend, worth every second when I see his face as he loses everything." The Japanese investors exchanged shocked glances. One of them closed his folder sharply, his expression hardening. Diana staggered back, her composure shattering. This is taken out of context. At that moment, the door opened once more. A small figure stepped in, Jasmine, holding a phone in her small hands, escorted by a social worker. Her voice was steady despite her size. "Hi, Mr. Marcus," she said. "Remember me? I was under your desk last night when you called Mr. Yamamoto and said you were going to steal Mr. Jonathan's company." The silence was deafening. Marcus's face turned crimson. "This is insane! You're going to believe a street kid over me?" One of the investigators spoke firmly. "We believe evidence, and we have more than enough." The agents moved forward, placing handcuffs on Marcus and Diana. Marcus exploded, slamming his fist on the table. "You bastard! You set us up!" Jonathan rose slowly, adjusting his tie. His voice was low, sharp as glass. "No, Marcus. You set yourself up. I just gave you the rope." As Diana was led away in tears, Jonathan looked at her one final time. The woman who had once managed his life with precision had spent years stabbing him in the back. He felt no pity, only closure. Jasmine tugged on his sleeve. "They're really going to jail, right?" Jonathan looked down at her and gave the first genuine smile he'd felt in years. "Yes, Jasmine, for a very long time." Behind him, Marcus's threats echoed as the agents dragged him out. "This isn't over! I'll destroy you, Jonathan!" Jonathan didn't even turn. "You already tried, and you lost." For the first time, the empire Marcus and Diana thought they controlled was gone, and Jonathan Miller was free. 6 months later, Jonathan Miller stood in his new office, 20 floors above the city. The skyline glittered, but it wasn't the view that made him smile. It was the silence, the kind that comes when parasites have finally been cut away. Miller Industries was thriving again. Free from Marcus and Diana's theft, the company had grown by 40%. The Japanese investors had walked away the day of the arrests, but 3 other corporations had quickly approached Jonathan with legitimate deals. The empire was stronger than ever, rebuilt not on lies, but on truth. Gabriel walked in, carrying his briefcase. "It's official," he said. "Marcus got 12 years, Diana 8. They lost everything: houses, accounts, assets, all seized." He smirked. "Poetic justice, don't you think?" Jonathan nodded, satisfaction flickering in his eyes. "Justice, yes, but not victory. Victory is what comes after." At that moment, the office door burst open. Jasmine ran in, her school uniform neatly pressed, a backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She waved a paper proudly. "Mr. Jonathan, Dad, I got an A on my math test." Jonathan crouched to meet her at eye level, his smile warm. "Of course you did. I never doubted you for a second." Gabriel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a rare grin spreading across his face. "Still amazes me," he said. "A 7-year-old saved a $200 million company?" Jonathan looked at Jasmine, his voice soft but certain. "She didn't just save the company. She saved me." The adoption had become official 3 months earlier. Jasmine Miller now had a last name she could be proud of, and a home she could finally call her own. For Jonathan, she was no longer just the little girl who warned him in the parking lot. She was family. He remembered her grandmother's words, repeated through Jasmine. "When you see someone getting stepped on and you can help, you help. Because next time, it could be you." That simple truth had changed everything. 5 years later, Miller Industries ranked among the top 100 tech companies in the nation. Jonathan had created a scholarship fund in Jasmine's honor, helping hundreds of children find education and safety. Jasmine herself, now 12, served as the honorary president of the program. Her sharp eyes and fearless voice inspired others the same way she had inspired him. At the anniversary dinner for the program, Jonathan stood beside him on stage. She leaned into the microphone and said, "Do you know what the best day of my life was? The day I got into Dad's car. Because that day, I didn't just save his company. I found my family." The crowd erupted in applause. Jonathan's eyes glistened, his heart full. Marcus and Diana had tried to strip him of everything he built. Instead, their betrayal had given him something greater than wealth or power. They had given him Jasmine. And with her by his side, Jonathan had discovered the greatest truth of all. Real revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so strong, so beautiful, that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a forgotten footnote in the story of your triumph.